So many antagonists are forgettable. I've read hundreds of scripts in my career where the antagonist is just the embodiment of evil or the polar opposite of the protagonist. And while sometimes this works, other times it makes things feel a little predictable. But every once in a while, a writer is able to craft an antagonist that is so mesmerizing and memorable and colorful and emotive and purposeful that they transform the story in an unforgettable way and lodge themselves in our minds forever. Hello everyone, I'm Jacob and I'm a senior story analyst with Slated, and while covering a really good script recently, something dawned on me which was really interesting involving antagonists and specifically how to craft an antagonist that matters to your story. And when I say an antagonist that matters, what I mean is the antagonist influences and highlights the theme and message of the story and of the protagonist's arc in a memorable and impactful way. Before we dive in, I just want to say that not every story needs a character that's an antagonist. Some really great stories and scripts have just a general obstacle that serves as the antagonizing force of the story. But when you have a story where the antagonist is an actual character, I encourage you to just consider this trick to make sure that your antagonist is as relevant to the story and to the theme as possible. If you Google antagonist, you'll see the roots of the word. But what's important in understanding this trick is the root agon, which refers to struggle. I think a lot of writers think that means physical suffering, that sort of struggle. But one of the most popular words that uses this root is the word agony. Agony refers to a very specific and personal mental and emotional struggle that people feel that's very tiered to them and what they're going through and what they have to experience. And while reading the script recently from a writer that totally gets this, I stumbled on a trick that I think works really, really well. If you're struggling with making your antagonist stand out, consider not making them the complete opposite of the protagonist or someone who is pure evil. Instead, make the antagonist extremely similar to the protagonist in a major way and a reflection of what the protagonist could turn into if they go down the wrong path along their arc. When you make the antagonist a reflection of the darkest potential of the protagonist, things get really interesting because they're not just someone that the protagonist has to fight, but they're someone that makes the protagonist fight against themselves as they're challenged with their sense of identity along their internal arc. And this is how you could get that great combination of internal and external conflict throughout your story. I forget who said it, but I once heard that if you have your protagonist and your antagonist sat together in a room, that conversation should be one of the most interesting conversations you've ever heard. And this trick is a great way to achieve just that because it ensures that both characters know exactly where the other characters are coming from because they have these similarities, even if their moral conclusions are vastly different. If the antagonist really knows and understands the protagonist's internal weakness, then they're the best character to push the protagonist towards their demise in a really sadistic, emotional, internal journey that elevates the theme. And some of the most impactful and memorable antagonists in film and television do just that. So next, let's look at 4 examples of well-known antagonists who accomplish this trick in different ways. Darth Vader is terrifying, especially in that ending scene in Rogue One, but if we look at the original Star Wars trilogy, Luke isn't only scared of Darth Vader because he's this menacing dark figure, but he's also afraid that one day he might become like him. When he learns that Vader's blood flows through him, things get even more intense as internal and external conflict bleed from the same source.
To them, you're just a freak. Like me.
In The Dark Knight, we see an antagonist that's positive he could push Batman to break his one rule and follow him down the path of chaos. Both are vigilantes. Both are outcasts. But in order for Batman to succeed, he has to do much more than physically overpower the Joker.
You either die a hero, or you live long enough to see yourself become the villain.
He also has to overcome the Joker's sadistic and personal emotional manipulation.
Look at you go!
Now this trick is not limited to action and sci-fi, we also see it in romantic comedies like The Devil Wears Prada. Andy wants nothing more than to have a successful career in the magazine business, even if it means serving under the most grueling fashion paper editor, Miranda Priestley.
Is there some reason that my coffee isn't here? Did she go to Rwanda for the beans or something?
Other than being intensely sharp and abrasive, over the top, and painfully upfront, Miranda makes for a meaningful antagonist because she shows Andy what she might become in a few years down the line if she continues to throw her life and her loved ones away for a shot at success and perfection. Again, this leads to some incredible moments of comparing and contrasting between these two characters that reveal the internal conflict, the protagonist's arc, and the overall theme of the story. Imagine how much less meaning and purpose the film would have had if it just followed an intern having to deal with a grueling boss in an industry she has no goal of growing within.
I was born with scum like you. I am from the gutter too.
In the book, musical, and film Les Miserables, both Jean Valjean and Inspector Javert were born in the gutter and raised in a life surrounded by the persecuted working class. They have the same upbringing, but by the turning point, Valjean learns to live by love and mercy, while Javert feels life can only be lived through justice and a defined right and wrong. This leads to a brilliant collision of internal and external conflict when Valjean has a chance to achieve personal justice by killing Javert, the man that has been hunting him down for years and forcing him to live in agony. When Valjean ultimately chooses to spare Javert's life, it showcases Valjean's character arc and reveals the theme. It also shatters the perception Javert has on the world to the point where he no longer feels he could go on living, highlighting how theme divides these two characters with incredibly similar upbringings. Of course, there are a lot of stories where the antagonist doesn't reflect the darkest potential of the protagonist, and sometimes they are still great. But if we look back on films that were a little underwhelming and had antagonists that were a little forgettable, and we just imagine for a second what it would have been like if the antagonist was even more linked to the protagonist's internal journey, where the protagonist came from, and the overall theme, we might find ourselves saying, wow, that would have been a cool movie that could have really saved the story. We're often taught to assume that the antagonist is simply the opposite of the protagonist. Hero, villain, light side, dark side. But that approach easily falls into predictability and boringness. Antagonists can be more than a physical obstacle or a one-dimensional bad guy. If their only challenge to the protagonist is physical, then they'll only be remembered for their physical attributes and actions. But if they're made to be worryingly similar to the protagonist, so much so that the protagonist could end up just like them if they fail to reach a positive end to their internal journey, then that's when things start to get immeasurably exciting. That's when the character starts to matter on a much more emotional, deep-cutting, provocative, antagonizing, and memorable level. I hope you enjoyed that last video, and if you'd like our team at Slated to review your script, you can check out the link in the description, learn all about Slated's patented 3-reader script analysis, and if you like screenwriting or film finance content like this, don't forget to subscribe. Until next time, happy writing.